The stage is yours, Fabian. Again, this first session is on storytelling, the topic of storytelling and communication. Thanks, Fabian. Stage is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to talk about local climate data stories. My name is Fabian, and I'm presenting here on behalf of my co-authors, Lukas and Marc also. So this is a discussion paper discussing how we can leverage data-driven storytelling to communicate effects and mitigation of climate change with a specific focus on the local context. So our scenario consists of climate change as a topic on the one side, but on the other hand, locality as a second thing. And this discerns us from a lot of data stories that are already there about climate change. They often report on global phenomena and abstract things, but not something people can see and experience in their direct local environment necessarily. And since we are having data stories, data is an important ingredient too. And on the other hand, we have the citizens of a city or region as our stakeholders who will consume those data stories. In the paper, we emphasize 7 different characteristics of the scenarios. So quickly going through it, we have certain topics of climate change with specific relevance for the exact local setting. So some cities might be at a river, have different features than those at the sea, and so on. So depending on the climate, local climate, different topics are relevant. Then, of course, the locality provides a very limited scope. On the one hand, this might be a challenge because data might not be available on the local level as on the global level. But on the other hand, also a great opportunity because we can maybe record some data ourselves, or we don't have to deal with huge data sets to do something to visualize it and present it. Then we can also consider the local context. So often you can only interpreting the data if you know the context it was recorded and refers to. And this is much easier in the local scenario because there we can easily research and describe the local context. Maybe we don't even have to describe this explicitly because people might be very familiar with their local context. So we are addressing the citizens of the very region or city. So they are, on the one hand, laymen regarding maybe climate change and data visualization, but they are experts about their local environment. They know where they live, and we can build on this previous knowledge and go much deeper than maybe if we have a general data story on the global level. This also connects to an increased interest and concern if people are seeing their own environment affected by climate change. They might be much more interested in the topic, and maybe we can reach audiences broader than we can typically reach with data stories if we report them in a global context. Also, the local context gives options for participation. So the citizens might not be only the consumer of the data stories, but also can take part in the production of them. So either individual citizens or through interest groups and institutions, they can participate in collecting the data, analyzing the data, describing the data and the insights. And of course, like Ben also mentioned in the introduction, we are interested in presenting some actionable conclusions to do something to mitigate climate change or to change something. And here specifically on the local level, it might be much easier to do something than on the global level. So the hope is that people might not, after reading such a story, be frustrated and depressed, but feel rather inspired to do something in their local environment. In the paper, we have more content. We analyzed a few data stories from local journalism. We found some interesting ones and that reported weather data and related things. But what we didn't find is a lot of visualization. So data was mainly described textually and not as visualization or even interactive visualization. Then in the paper, we have featured 3 examples of interactive stories as examples for local data, climate data stories that students developed at our university. And there we have 2 scroll stories and 1 interactive animation that discuss different phenomena like local heat islands, the local vegetation, and a local outlook on the next decades, how many heat waves we can expect and things like that. We added also an educational perspective. So what was our experience using these data stories in an educational context, and give some insights on that. So finally, we are discussing research challenge and opportunities that we want to address in the future, and hope maybe to inspire also some work of others, and are open for collaboration. We want to look into better authoring support and adaptive stories. So we think that often on the local level, people have problems developing great data stories because it's quite resource intensive. And by making the authoring process smoother, we can help in this regard. The local context also provides great opportunities for disseminations. For instance, we can think about on-site stories that show the data in the context they were actually recorded, and make them really tangible in the local context. But talking about the topic like climate change, it's also an emotional topic of high social relevance. So we might need interdisciplinary research that studies the impact of such data stories on emotion, on social and political debates, as well as ethical aspects. So this is a short walk through our paper on local climate data stories. In the center, we have these 7 characteristics and further contributions arranged around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. Please put your questions in Slido or keep them for yourselves and raise your hand. We have our next speaker, Zezhong Wang from Simon Fraser University. Welcome, Zezhong. And those will be 2 short talks about 2 short papers. We cannot hear you yet.
Right.
There you are.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Zezhong Wang, a postdoc from Simon Fraser University. In this project, I collaborated with experts from climate science and literature to create data comics for explaining the science and data about climate change. Today, I'll be sharing 2 examples. First, it's titled as Pasta or Disaster on the topic of permafrost. And the second draft work in progress is titled Blooms on the topic of eutrophication in freshwater. So to create these comics, I use fiction, combine the explanation of scientific concept with the expressive data visualizations. Fiction means we combine the factual information with the storytelling techniques. For example, during hiking, a family discovered that a mountain hut had been demolished due to the thawing permafrost. And then they started to discuss the status of permafrost, such as the geographical distributions, temperature change of permafrost at a global scale. By looking at the temperature, there is a common misconception of permafrost near 0 degrees are not thawing. That's due to the physics of latent heat. It's similar to when boil water starting from snow. The temperature stays at 0 degrees until the very last piece of ice melts. They compared this experiment to the temperature changes observed in permafrost. The second example highlights the increasing ecosystem problems in freshwater due to the proliferation of blue-green algae. And since animals are directly impacted by the lake eutrophication, and they are motivated to uncover the problems affecting their lakes and playing roles in data collection and analysis using their unique abilities. For instance, the heron observes from the sky and creates an abstract art and representing the chlorophyll concentrations, which is based on actual satellite data. And underwater animals from different locations and contribute to water sampling as a part of citizen science initiative. A snail analyzes the water samples to estimate the biomass of algae and presenting the process of counting and estimation methods. And the result of water sample analysis are presented through a data visualization that's created by different types of water plants, representing the biomass of various algae types. And now we are making more examples. I would like to connect any of you if you're interested to discuss this work further. Thank you.
Thank you, Zezhong. And we have our last talk from Katerina. Welcome, Katerina.
Hello, everyone. I am Katerina Batziakoudi from India, France. And today I'll be presenting our position statement paper, which discusses some challenges of designing visualizations to enhance the carbon numeracy of the general public. Studies have shown that people are increasingly aware of high emission actions like flying or eating meat and are able to make qualitative comparisons, such as recognizing that an apple has lower emissions than a burger. However, we struggle to understand the differences in magnitude between individual actions, underestimating or overestimating the impact of our choices. The ability to quantitatively understand the emissions associated with everyday choices, defined as carbon numeracy, and is crucial for reducing our individual carbon footprints and achieving the goal set by the Paris Agreement. Different daily actions have varying carbon costs, from some grams to tons of CO2 emissions. Common visualization techniques, such as linear and logarithmic charts, are not effective to support quantitative tasks between several orders of magnitude. Linear scales make it impossible to read and compare smaller magnitudes, and logarithmic scales present challenges for quantitative tasks, like estimating differences or ratios between values of same and neighboring magnitudes. As members of the visualization community, the challenge we face lies in designing novel visualizations of carbon emissions that effectively represent the magnitude of different actions, facilitate quantitative comparisons, and help people assess the impact of each action. To address these challenges, we propose some visualization features that could address these issues. We can leverage insights from cognitive psychology about human interpretation of large values, such as the categorical encoding of weight units, mimicking the way that we talk about numbers. We can also use scales proposed from the visualization literature about large value ranges, or design and evaluate novel ones. And last, we can incorporate defined metrics or thresholds, such as the daily and annual thresholds of CO2 emissions based on the Paris Agreement, to help people assess the impact of their actions relative to those metrics. In the example of the visualization we designed, we can see all the magnitudes and quantitatively compare. For example, a transatlantic flight costs almost 100 times more than a train ticket from Paris to London. A burger costs almost the half of our daily threshold, and a new car can be equal to 10 years of emissions. Controlled experiments will be necessary to evaluate the effectiveness of these visualizations for both low-level and high-level tasks. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Katerina. We have, thanks to all the speakers again, so big round of applause in this virtual room with all the virtual echoes. We have now time for questions. We have about 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes for questions and high-level discussions. Again, put questions in Slido. Do we have any question right now in the room? Please raise your hand. I see loads of applauses. I have a first question I want to start with, and this is, again, any of the presenters, feel free to start answering this, but it's really, I think, a question to everyone. Oh, we have a question from the audience? No? Okay, so my first question would really be, from all your techniques, from all the research you have described, and from your own experiences, how do you think we can best turn understanding into action through storytelling and data? So going beyond the communication and understanding issue, but how can we make people, say, play with the data, interact with the data, experience this, how this stuff is relevant for themselves, and empower them to do something with the knowledge that we want to transmit through these stories? Just raise your hand if anyone wants to speak.
So maybe I can comment from this more journalistic perspective that journalists try to do that in their articles to present conclusions also, but it's sometimes hard to always give some positive outlooks. It's specifically hard if it's a global problem and you're at best can have something on the local level. So localization, that's what we're suggesting for making it easier. But first, to make this effort. And maybe another thing is there are many great visualizations, and we've seen some here also on how to visualize personal impact. But I think this approach of the personal footprint is quite limited because you can only improve your own personal footprint. I mean, you can set an example and hopefully other will follow, but it would be more effective to change something on the political level so that people push, I don't know, their representatives in doing something, and yeah, that this topic becomes important in elections, although maybe some other topics seem very relevant at the moment too, and stuff like this. So I think the political dimension is very important if you want to do something about it.
So are you suggesting we're just powerless as visualization people and researchers?
No. But our visualization should get involved with politics and decision making, and maybe it's nice to analyze their own footprint, but the impact beyond that is much more interesting if we really talk about changing something.
Benny?
There is a question from the audience for Zezhong. Sorry if I missed it. Was there a target age for each comic you made? Did it influence the style you chose?
Right. So since when we do that, we aim just the general publics who have no experience working with this data or never heard about those concepts like permafrost. So when I designed it, I didn't have a very particularly group of age, but just a particular background of like visualization or data literacy, which is the beginner. But when how it is perceived, so after they seen these examples and they were very interested in the permafrost one, and then they decided to include this in their national mountain report, but a session under for children. So I will see how it's being perceived by children, but I think I definitely see it's easier to be to be understood for children because the level of the knowledge and the complexity of data is not very high. But we don't know. We haven't tested with different groups.
This is actually a follow-up question. So I've really liked hearing about the data comics, and I would be curious to learn more about how the students received it. So we did a multimedia storytelling project about ocean life this summer, and some of the students really loved it. These are college level students, grad school. And some of them felt like it was too far removed from action. And so I just wonder if you experienced that too, and if so, how you navigated that.
So can you repeat that? So then experience what? I missed that.
The using multimedia storytelling to really get into both the data and the research, but also to express themselves very creatively. And some of them really enjoyed that, and some of them didn't. And so I just wonder if you experienced that too, And if so, how you navigated it educationally.
Right. So you mean they enjoyed it while they creating that, right? During the creation process.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yes. So to make that, I need to understand the data myself. So I need to really understand what is going on there, understand the science behind it, and that does like encourage me to go deeper, to understand the science. And because this project is collaborated with climate science, I had the privilege to closely work with the scientists who actually doing the field work, who collect data in the field, who analyze the data from different resources. And I heard their stories, like either how they did the research or personal anecdote around the challenges. So which is very fascinating. And now we are trying to use the similar methods, but not me creating the data comics, but the others. So for example, we involved in some indigenous people who can tell the story from their perspective. So there's a whole different new perspectives. And yeah, I do believe so. While during this collaboration between different people from different expertise and backgrounds, so they exchange knowledge and learn new stuff, and they also have new insight during this collaboration process.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you ask a question, please state your full name and affiliation so people can follow up easier after that one. We have one very quick question from Slido, which is from a post by Elsie Lee Robbins. How do you evaluate whether and to what extent your visualizations are effective? If anyone wants to reply?
Maybe, yeah, Katerina.
Yeah, I think it really depends. So if, for example, in our case that we focus on quantitative comparisons, it's important to check if people, they can actually make these comparisons. So we measure time and accuracy. But in cases that we care about engagement or understanding, I think other approaches have to be more suitable. I'm not aware about how to evaluate engagement, for example.
Fabian, maybe a quick comment before we
maybe
move on to the next topic.
Further than this. So if people really do something differently later on, but this is hard to evaluate because we would need long-term studies, and maybe it's not this one thing that changed their mind, but multiple things that contributed, but that would be probably the ultimate goal here, but really hard to measure.
Okay, thank you all the speakers again and those who engaged in the discussion. That's the end of the first topic, and I will hand over to Fanny to introduce our second topic. Thanks again, everyone.